All righty. And the hat still stays, right? Okay. Niki Davis, Ward 5, Washington, D.C. And I'll go right into the letter. This is to Councilmember McDuffie, who is the current council member of Ward 5. And today is Friday, December 10th, 2021. Yes, good morning, council member. Will you be hosting a Ward 5 holiday party this year? You give the best, in my humble opinion. I felt so welcome to my ward when I first moved to Perry Street between Michigan Avenue and 12th Street Northeast. I was a renter at the Parrington condominiums until I closed on my first home in DC just next door at the Wilbur condominiums. You held a party that I took one of my favorite elders of Ward 5, Ms. Dolores Brown of 22nd Street Northeast, who taught me much about the changing landscape of our city since she was a fourth-generation Washingtonian. I am a transplant, a true gentrifier. My family roots come from Sumter, South Carolina, with both my parents becoming the firstborn Yankees when all my grandparents moved north to the Philadelphia area during the Great Migration, when lynching and Jim Crow laws forced displacement of our people in hope of safety and more just opportunity. I understand from your press that you studied civil rights law. Because of that, I hope you find this long introduction helpful and not too cumbersome or a burden on your time. Please consider it a personal narrative of Afro-Indigenous herstory in DC and our struggle for civil and human rights. And please forgive me in advance if you do find reading this very long message a burden. It is not my intention to bore you or to take up your valuable time. I simply intend to connect to you in every humane and not exclusively politicized way. You see, my father also studied law. That was his field of choice after he served as captain of the U.S. Army. He used what he studied, economics was his undergrad major, and became quite a renowned federal mediator. One of our nation's first black male federal mediators who made his greatest advancements under the Carter administration. Now that I've come to deeply love my biological father, he was very difficult to love as a child. I feared him mostly. I call him Poppy. He was named that by his second wife, my beloved Mama Carlota of Media, Pennsylvania. Poppy purchased a beautiful little home for a great price right across from Walter Reed Hospital, long before it was sold off in parcel lots for huge profits for the developers on Dahlia Street Northwest in 1969. Our first DC home was indeed in need of much fixing up when we purchased it. My mother, Helen Delaney, did just that. She turned 809 Dahlia Street into a showpiece. She redesigned the front yard landscape and planted such beautiful bushes, trees, and colorful delights that bloomed in splendor for each season. My favorite was the Japanese maple. It was ironic that we lived in the alphabet streets named after trees and flowers. My mother found ideas in furniture to turn the interior of our home into an international gallery of design, lending a sense of light and cleared space to give breath and a sense of safety, creativity, critical thought, and focus for her four very active and brilliant children. We had the luxury as a young family to be able to travel all around Europe with Poppy as he served in Germany during the Cold War just prior to our conflict in Vietnam. So my mom shipped small masterpieces to the United States that still had not been duplicated within the scope of IKEA. Then our walls were full of original oil paintings and watercolors my mother both collected from other artists. mostly Will Barnett and her youngest brother, Edward Butler, along with tiny gems from Eddie, her only son, and me, her middle daughter of 3. Eddie and I were constantly drawing, making doodles and cards and calendars, since we both were determined to be professional artists since pre-K. The paintings, drawings, and watercolors I treasured the most, my mother actually did herself. Will Barnett helped her take art classes during the 1 year she was a stay-at-home mom, and she produced replicas of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel and painted portraits of each one of her children. Mine had me in my famous 2 pigtail braids with the part down the middle. Looking quite somber, I brooded a lot as a child. With my baby sister Michaela's was my favorite, a smile with a wondrous sun hat. Debbie's, the eldest, resembled a scholar to me, and Eddie's portrait was simply the best representation of such a beautiful child. Our brother Eddie had a sparkle in his eyes and the most stunning lips, with the best afro that could actually hold a full shape, like thicker than Angela Davis type afro. That's a gem for light-skinned kids with mixed hair. Our parents held many parties in our new beautiful home in Uptown Northwest. Poppy even allowed his kids to hold parties in our basement. It turned mostly into a gym and sweaty dojo for Eddie and his best friend, our cousin Jeffrey. They would spar and pretend to be Bruce Lee while throwing Poppy's power tools at the wooden door as if they were exclusive Chinese weapons to ward off the many actual gang members who would terrorize new kids in the neighborhood as an initiation, especially light-skinned Yankees who were highly educated and well-traveled. We were odd for sure, different, and that oddness seemed to pose a threat to our new Tacoma Elementary School schoolmates. So we used my father's many books on yoga, meditation, and the martial arts as a way out of this terrorism that we had never encountered before among Black people. Our only enemies in Germantown, Philadelphia, at our Catholic elementary school were poor, white, traumatized kids who were in the minority, so they never posed a threat to even mention. And our little interim school in New Jersey, where we went for that 1 year my mother didn't have to work. The kids were wonderful to us. The school budget was high, and we had amazing honor classes and so many sports, chess clubs, and debate teams, and language clubs for our public elementary school. So no one had the time or the excessive trauma to take out on each other. I found that our New Jersey public school system in the late 60s was diverse and very safe for new kids on the block. Please note that it was still a majority Black school. Washington, D.C. public schools were the complete opposite by 1970. In D.C., it was publicized that we ranked near the worst in the nation. We were 49th out of the 50 states. Our D.C. public school standards and funding fell so dramatically after the 1968 riots following the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that they became literal, unsafe warehouses for undernourished and traumatized Black children whose lives were run by gang members and juvenile hall revolving door, institutionalized and criminalized young targets of racist neglect. DC was creating a pipeline to prison, using the public schools as a source pool, and my father was furious. Too many Black families could not afford private schools, so they chose our excellent Catholic schools to put their children in to save their bodies and minds from such a cruel trap that seemed worse than actual slavery. Poppy could not get us into our local parish or Catholic school because the schools were filled to capacity with waiting lists that were too long. We used the National Cathedral that I now live in walking distance from as our home church. Here, we were actual and devout Catholics, and we couldn't enroll because even non-Catholics chose Catholic schools to escape the hell of our horrid public school system. We were forced to attend Tacoma Elementary School that had gangs that would chase my baby sister home in tears and keep my brother and older sister in nearly daily fights. Poppy was not the only one furious. So was I. In time, my siblings and I made more than peace with our neighbors. We exposed them to other ideas of conflict negotiation while living in violent trauma and neglect. The fighting stopped. The Davis children became quite popular. We brought music, art, skateboarding, reading, writing, jacks, theater, and our neighbors got us into tag football teams, yard gymnastics, and cartwheel championships. And best of all, our father brought Aikido, the art of peace, the art of love. Clyde Takaguchi was teaching it right down the street from Tacoma. It changed everything about the former violence among boys and gangs in that neighborhood. Debbie Chandler's father, who lived across the street, created an emergency watch task force to protect young girls from our neighborhood rapist, Cisco, who would target young girls and rape them under a huge knife he carried. St. Elizabeth's, before it was sold off and parceled out to Homeland Security and rabid developers, couldn't hold him because of the Saks red tape bureaucracy. So his mother was distraught. Yet she worked with Poppy, Mr. Chandler, and the police to end such a nightmare on Dahlia Street. What I didn't realize as a child that came to Northwest DC from Philly with my black gentrifying family that upgraded our neighborhood on all levels and increased the fair market value of our home and the real estate value of our neighbor's home was that the term gentrifying would be grossly misused and politicized during your tenure as council member, Mr. McDuffie. That word came to be used as if it's a strange and necessary phenomenon of urban life that is an inevitable product of urban renewal. As if gentrification is a smart business and government partnership to raise revenue and revitalize depressed black neighborhoods and what is thought to be and labeled by this administration as useless and vacant and abandoned spaces and property. Once again, I'm furious. This time is not the purposeful neglect of low-income and vulnerable black children in DC as I watch them funneled and forced into violence, prison, gang life, crime, gun possession, police conflict, state murder, and abuse, and forced and displaced into some of our cruelest, most unsafe streets and shelters that guarantee addiction and food deserts, to make sure they are malnourished, underslept, threatened, abused, and high, with major trauma disorders as they are further neglected and pathologized by your administration. Under your watch, while I pay you to protect them and give them the same opportunities, if not better, than Mayor Marion Barry gave me and my siblings as a child. May he rest in power. Though my own trauma can be set off at any point regarding this matter that has only been renewed as I watch our crack and fentanyl epidemic reach new highs, and as I see and feel and know we have once again earned the term murder capital under your administration. Yes, I can be furious at any point with just a slight trigger about your administration has increased what has been coined the new Jim Crow slave system in DC. It's a racist system that has been so eloquently written about, and I'm sure you have read books on by famous Black authors based on your online and posted press. But what I would actually like to have is a civil and robust discussion about, and with you personally, is the travesty of my direct and continual harm on my financial, physical, emotional, and spiritual health due to your direct policies, procedures, and practices regarding new development on my block, in my neighborhood, and in my entire ward. I would love to speak to you directly about the enormous contradiction in my personal and first-hand experience of how you claim to be a civil rights lawyer, as you have recently announced publicly that you intend to run for the office of the Attorney General of DC next term. Yet you have promoted and allowed and created development deals and the destruction of sacred and historic spaces of Black and Indigenous people and our history, as well as vital Black low-income housing and generational Black homes and vital Black-owned businesses, while you blocked the development of Ward 5 resident-initiated projects that answered our well-recorded Ward 5 long-term issues with sustainable designs and brilliant plans to address the actual needs of our community, especially our Black and senior residents who pay the most taxes for the longest amount of years and who always vote. As you have literally left young Black children in Ward 5 to bleed out on our streets at record numbers, with funds raised to help the violence on our streets and help educate and engage our police officers who violate the rights and humanity of our Black youth under legislation that you wrote and had great press photos that never made it into actualization of the programs, but were allowed to fail before they even had a chance to begin. And no press was given to what happened to the funds. And I witnessed these criminal acts of injustice and corruption against the people of Ward 5 as the most violent and lowly civil and human rights violations carried out under your watch, acted out by the DC government officials paid by me while you act as our trusted to be competent Ward 5 council member. That means I paid you to harm me and so many other Black, Indigenous, and vulnerable and unresourced citizens of Ward 5. It's such a shocking realization for me. Perhaps you can understand my urgency to have that talk with you during your holiday party. I don't know what else to do as I witness you literally and continuously allow very toxic and anti-community developers who have rushed toward construction completion during our shutdown and pandemic deaths and spreading of diseases as if profit by development was an essential business. And with these new toxic, rushed up zone developments. I have had to bear the burden of all that comes with toxic, rushed up zoning piles. This is all the other unwarranted and uninformed interruptions and intrusions that come with huge trucks and vans and equipment and torturous noise and EPA violations that tear down foundations of existing buildings and cause floodings of basements and black mold and create cancer clusters around overloaded telephone poles that are overextended and leaning dangerously, wires and portals that workers, now this is important, the Petco workers, Comcast workers, all the utility workers that have the rights to hang wires on those overextended telephone poles that came in new and almost twice the size up, have to wear protections by law. They can't even be near what you allow all of us to live around. And then when the Department of Health finds out for some strange reason the seniors are dying with cancer way before coronavirus 19, and our epidemiologist was wondering and looking into why. Why are so many Ward 5 seniors dying? And these toxic and deadly situations led to long-term illnesses and long-term irreparable damages. And they were caused by corporate suppliers who come to prepare for, serve, and provide for the new buyers and leasers of these brand new, unwanted, and community voted against upzoned pop-up developments with their concrete, high-priced, per square foot so-called luxury spaces. So my street is overloaded and torn up over and over and over again with less and less legal spaces to park my overtaxed and overtax paid fees and over-ticketed registered vehicle that can and will be towed for exorbitant fees and fines, so that the city grants all the parking spaces left for months at a time to utility companies, contractors, construction teams, corporate and individual property owners, all new and almost all foreign and out of state, tree demolition teams, that's my favorite, as our scared, displaced, and sick former residents are harmed and violated and neglected to live on the streets and sleep on the unsheltered bus stops and the benches as they lose their minds, while neglected and free to roam on 12th Street as a small group of unfit police officers become the first responders instead of our crisis intervention teams. And that's crisis intervention teams, because I was part of the movement to even create them around the country. So DC has them, but they're not deployed when very sick, clearly mentally ill residents are on the street. We bring untrained, cruel, scared police officers, and then hell happens. So I took a time to make clear that you understand what a crisis intervention team is. So as we created and you created these great programs, your reps go to the ANC meetings of Ward 5, and they're told by the reps of your office that when they see these sick, generational DC residents pushed to the streets who lost their homes, they're instructed by your office to call the police, which now we know nationwide leads to Karenism and even worse, instead of crisis intervention teams, which are already in place before you came into office, or the non-existent programs that were paid millions of dollars for you to implement that never got implemented. So when these kids and the elders end up being harassed or arrested or put in jail by our DC's finest, it's not their fault, it's yours. So yet in Ward 5, I have witnessed firsthand how we now give such extravagant privileges and services and benefits to foreign investors and overly resourced corporate and individual owners of Ward 5 property willing to make lucrative deals that benefit DC's prominent shot callers. I'm sure you can see how all this collectively destroys us, our people, black people, the same black people who fought for those civil and human rights you studied. I have to breathe here. So my grandmother had to see lynching to get you to have the right to study something called civil rights in college. And then when you get the privilege, you harm us worse than the lynchers down south. And that is statistical. So as you give all these privileges to the ones that you're planning DC to be for, our health, our history, and our presence in Ward 5 is eliminated. Yet you are enabled to hide behind the rebranding of the wonderful term called gentrification and take no public responsibility for all the damage and violence of the obscene civil and human rights violations and destruction of Ward 5 under your tenure. How is this possible? I ask you. How is all this happening with my life to bear witness under your watch, with you being paid to be ultimately and solely responsible directly to the people you are sworn to represent, and I believe you're sworn on Bibles. So you claim to be a civil rights lawyer. Isn't that ironic? Help me understand from your direct experience, because I'm willing to listen. How you being paid by me to serve me, you have come to lead such devastation in Ward 5 and have the audacity to run for the office of the Attorney General of Washington, D.C. I'm mystified, I'm stunned, and I'm furious. I would love to tell you personally how what I've experienced in your administration has been the worst tragedy and most corrupt betrayal of black people I have ever lived through in D.C. in my entire life. This is no personal attack. This is fact. As a citizen who once believed in you and helped you and helped other residents believe in you and vote for you. And listen to what I'm saying. Not just vote for you, but believe in you. So I wish to face the mistake I made by facing you directly. I made a mistake voting for you. I made a mistake misleading elders to believe in you. So, if you and any of your very competent and efficient staff. And I don't mean that lightly, they really are. That's how I got fooled so much. Your staff has been incredible. And then I realized I hadn't said a word to you. It's very easy to fool someone when you don't speak to them. See if they can fit me in for a conversation face-to-face. It can be by Zoom. You can hide behind anything you want. Only 20 minutes of your time, a time that my tax dollars have been paying you for, with all your full staff, your transportation, your phones, your computers, your laptops, all the things you have that's way well and beyond my lifestyle that you've enjoyed for years, Mr. McDuffie. I'm sure that just my, 1/700,000th of the tax dollars have more than paid for 20 minutes of your time after all these years. Especially since I'm one of the highest taxed in Ward 5. See, I'm a primary resident owner, I have a registered business in DC. I have that registered car, which you know I pay much more than so many other people because you understand the fee rate of DC registration and DC cars and DC insurance for those cars. And I work in DC and pay DC taxes. And I actually buy and support DC businesses and DC products. And if you come from another state, you're shocked at how high our taxes are. So you know that's a lot of taxes, Mr. McDuffie. I'm the highest taxed in this city, and I get the lowest respect from you. So Congressman Norton has heard part of these experiences during one of her Norton in the Neighborhood talks, and she promised me personally, on tape, with the press, that she would facilitate a meeting between you and I and any other seniors who have had the experiences that I've had. But as you know, that never happened because it never happened. I called Congressman Norton over and over and over again. And then the pandemic happened. Then I called again. Then I sent emails. But I'm sending her a copy of this letter because Congressman Norton has earned my respect. She gave me at least 4 minutes on the agenda that she prepared. She came into our neighborhood library and actually had gentrification on the agenda. And she addressed it directly, and she talked to all the constituents in Ward 5, and it was packed with what, Mr. McDuffie? Seniors and vets, mostly. Where are all those new, young, white hipsters that you created all that stuff for? There was maybe 1 or 2 in there. And there was a wonderful white father that was up in there with most of us seniors, black veterans, because we're the ones that's suffering in Ward 5. And he could testify and get so much more respect than anybody else in the room. He wasn't a Washingtonian, he was new, he was young, he was white, he was a father, he had his child there. It's amazing how much more respect out-of-staters get than the DC people who made you. It's incredible. So since that time, I've sent this letter to Congresswoman Norton's office. Her staff is incredible, and she is approachable, and you can reach her. And she has social media all over, so you can directly get involved with her there. And she helps people with disabilities and has those options online. It's an amazing thing. Your staff should study what Congressman Eleanor Norton does to engage her constituents. You would learn a lot. And I want to tell you about my agenda. It's so simple that it can hardly be believed. I actually believe in democracy, period. My father fought for it. My parents teach and practiced it with the federal government for decades. And I have democracy in my blood. I believe in good, transparent, responsible, and responsive to the people democracy, especially for those who pay for it, work for it, fight for it, and do what I'm doing now. Redress corruption and despotism. Democracy doesn't care what is on your biography on the web. It doesn't care whether you say you've studied civil rights law. It doesn't care how well your staff diffuses so that you can't ever get direct contact with your constituents. It doesn't care how fancy and how well paid your press magic makers are to make you seem like you're the opposite of what you actually are. No, democracy doesn't care. You know what democracy cares about? Democracy demands that all those taxes that I paid for all those years, it demands that you are actually working for me. That's what it demands. Now, of course, especially since 45, it is the flavor of the month to do the opposite of democracy, right? We're in the Wild Wild West now. You and Mayor Muriel Bowser have sold out DC to such a level that it's almost like no law even exists. And I must admit, 45, and you don't want me to say on tape what I think of the number 4 or 5 in the history of presidents of the United States, because that's a whole nother chapter. But I know you know who I'm talking about. And things happened under 4 or 5 in a federal city. And it was under your watch with Muriel Bowser. And history will always record what you and Muriel Bowser did under 4 or 5, while you talked crap and painted yellow letters on the streets. Because everybody now knows that once you release the narrative of the actual black residents who are not politically connected. Now, the politically connected ones will say that Muriel Bowser is fantastic. And you know what we say about lips. And then you have a whole bunch of black-looking people who will testify to your greatness. But we're talking about something that the Washington Post won't even do. Lift up the narrative of the majority of the people who actually suffered under what you did. And once that happens, no amount of smear campaign is going to change history. So you made choices while you were paid on what you were going to do. And when you signed off all those things for all those developers, and when we lost Providence Hospital, while we're losing McMillan Park, which I don't even know if you and your staff looked up to see how historic McMillan Park is. Do you even know whom the Olmsteeds are? Do you know about the history of the National Park Service? Do you know there's a connection between the history of the National Park Service and McMillan Park? And do you know that we know that DC got McMillan Park for $1. $1. So you and Mayor Bowser could never lie and say you needed to recoup costs to destroy McMillan Park and destroy, I believe it's the nation's only still example, but of course not with your little ragged developers who have destroyed the concrete. It's a slow sand water, what is it, like a cleansing unit? What is it?
Water filtration.
Water filtration. Like historic and 10 times more beautiful than the way that we're doing it now. If you understood what slow sand is and how that filters water, it would blow your mind. I'm gonna close this out now because I think I've said enough. I think you got the main point, and Mark can turn me off at any point. If you understood anything about the land and about nature, you would understand how brilliant sand is for filtration. It's been filtering things here, Mr. McDuffie, long before humanity. It's an old way. And you know, there's whole people who use sand to filter water. They're called the indigenous. They were here long before that little Italian lost his way and thought he was in India. So for me, because I'm part of that heritage, when I said I have the blood of democracy in me, please don't ever call me Indian unless you're an inside joker. Because I don't come from India. I come from Turtle Island. And only a completely confused, and I believe he might have been drunk at the time, lost, I'm discovering new lands for the kingdom and the queendoms of Europe, called this India. And we have been using sand to filter water for a long time. So of course that's brilliant when the Europeans do what they do the best, and that is to systemize it. They had the most incredible system, taking from the indigenous way to clean water and putting it in a massive way so we could clean all the water of the whole city, not just a village and not just a small tribe. And it is a masterpiece of history. And Black history is on top. Once it was designed into a park, before it was turned over to the city of DC, Black people used to jump the fence. They didn't care about the fence that was put up because it was a working plant, and then it was an abandoned plant. And do you know we used to grow food there? People would farm. People who worked for the plant would be allowed plots, and they would farm there, and they would go swimming and skinny dipping and have picnics. So forgive me when I get furious when some young punk white developer tells me that land had no Black and indigenous history. Because they see open space and they see dollar signs, and clearly so does your administration. You don't see culture. You don't see sacredness. You don't even see Black redemption. It's in our land and in our history and in our culture. So if you want to know civil rights, protect Black land. And for God's sake, protect Black children. Even if